much. I am so excited to be here with you all, and just really, really honored to be chatting with you today because I love this group. Like, you all are just the epitome of an authentic, deeply connected group. And I think in my first conversation with you all, I think I mentioned it. This feels like a true culture of connection and a very authentic one. And so I feel very honored to be a part of it. So I am here, like Alan and Lane said, to talk to you about authenticity. And I'm excited to share my story with you, not because I think it's unique, but because I know it's not. In fact, these topics that we're going to be talking about, the themes, I hear them over and over and over and over again. In fact, just today, I was having a discussion with a group about these exact topics. So to tell you a little bit more about myself, just very quickly, I am a leadership advisor. My name is Erika Gerdes, and I'm a leadership advisor. And I work with individuals and teams and leadership at some of the biggest companies in the world, like Facebook and Salesforce and Google and LinkedIn and Twitter and Pinterest and everywhere in between. And I'm working with them on helping them become more confident, being better salespeople, creating deeper connection, reaching bigger goals, taking bigger risks. And what I know from working with these people, when they're willing to be honest, what they are willing to tell me, again, almost in hushed voices, is that they know they want more from their lives, but they don't know what. They want to make a bigger impact, but they don't know how. They want to bring more of their full selves to their lives, to their work, to their communities, but they don't even know who they are. So that's what we're talking about today, is our full range, being ourselves, and or rather, I should say, knowing ourselves and being ourselves more fully so that we can experience more joy, more impact, more connection, more excitement, and make a bigger difference in this world. So I'm going to be sharing the best of what I have learned, what I've studied, what I've discovered, what I hear again and again from the people I'm working with, because everything I'm teaching or I'm going to be talking about with you is stuff that I've learned the hard way. And most of it I've never heard before. So as we go through this, please understand that I'm still learning also. And I'm an expert in some of these things, but certainly not all of them. Rather, it's a practice for me as well. So definitely let's make this super interactive. Ask any questions you have. If you don't understand something, or you want to challenge something, or you don't really get it, or you've got questions, or something different is coming up for you, please bring it up. Let's talk about it, because we're going to hopefully be together for the next 3 weeks talking about this in more depth. So I think it's really important that we clear any of the questions that you've got. So as I said, we're going to be talking about authenticity. That is what I am so passionate about. And while I'm not an expert in it, it's certainly something I practice every single day. We're going to talk about what it really means and what's standing in the way and why it's so important for us to overcome those things that are standing in the way so that we can experience more joy. So I'm actually going to turn off the screen share in just a second so that I can tell you a little bit more about myself. But as we look forward to what we're doing today and in the next couple of sessions, today we're going to be taking a deep dive into, again, what authenticity means, but more importantly, what's holding us back from it. Like, we all hear that authenticity is important, but why are we not able to practice it more? So you're going to walk away from today's session with very tangible and discrete, unique knowledge about yourself. This isn't going to be theoretical stuff. We're going to do this as a very interactive discussion and activity so that you can learn more about what's holding you back specifically. And then we'll do some group discussion as well so that we can hopefully hear from each other that we're not the only ones challenged with these things. In workshop 2, we're going to take what we learned from today and carry it over into next week so that we can talk about how we actually get over this stuff. How do we get out of our own way so that we can experience more full range? And then finally, in the third workshop, I'm going to give you very specific steps that you can begin practicing immediately to start to step into more of your own leadership and full potential. So are there any questions before we get started? Feel free to just jump in or ask them in the chat. Oh, okay. So I'm going to stop screen sharing so that I can look at you all a little bit more, because I'm sure if you've done this enough, you know that it's difficult to see people. So it's good to see so many faces. So let me tell you a little bit about me and why I think this is so important, because I could tell you like about my education and all of this stuff that's really typical, but I'm not going to. I'm going to tell you about the fact that I believe that what we are intended to teach, we must first learn. And it isn't the stuff that we're learning in school or even in our corporate trainings. It's the stuff that we learn in our hardest fought battles. For me, it's with gritted teeth and white knuckles. And that is authenticity. Man, is it the hardest thing in the world for me, because for the majority of my life, it was so much easier and so much safer being whoever I thought somebody else wanted me to be. The way I describe myself now, which I didn't know until the last several years, is that I am what I have affectionately called an overachieving, insecure people pleaser. I became whoever I needed to become. I did whatever I needed to do. I played to all the shoulds and all the should nots, because I thought that what was safest was to be whoever anyone else needed to be, to the point that I lost completely who I was. It did well for me. I did very well. I worked at Google for 12 years and I had, a good looking husband. I have beautiful babies, but behind the facade, I was so deeply insecure. I had no idea who I was, what I wanted, how I wanted to show up in this world. All I could think about was how I compared to everybody else around me. And all I ever saw was how I came up lacking. I wasn't pretty enough. I wasn't skinny enough. I wasn't adequate enough. I wasn't prepared enough. I wasn't educated enough. I wasn't enough. Every single person I have ever spoken with struggles with this question a lot. Am I blank enough? Am I valuable enough? Am I worthy enough? Am I strong enough? Am I educated enough? Am I rich enough? Whatever it might be. In fact, it's very interesting. I have been in the process of writing a book for a while that's currently on pause because of that overachiever thing. And in my interviews, what I discovered is that if you ask a high achiever who they are, they will tell you who they're not and what they are not. They won't tell you who they are, because for most of us, we don't actually even know who that is. So one of the biggest pivot points in my life, what actually led me to this work now, is that 8 years ago, my daughter was born with a spinal tumor. And she, at 3 months old, had a 7-hour spinal neurosurgery. And it was one of the scariest, hardest days of my life, and so far away from any plan that I had ever created in my life, anything that I could ever imagine happening, because I had tried so hard to be to be perfect and have a perfect life. And as I sat in the hospital with her, as she was recovering, and I hardly even recognized her because of how swollen she was from the surgery, I had a thought that entirely changed my life. And I recognized in that particular moment that I wasn't living my life for me. I was 33 or 34 years old. I had, for all intents and purposes, every gift anyone could ever imagine. I had the most blessed life, and yet I wasn't appreciating it. I wasn't living for me. I was living for everybody else, to the point that I didn't know who I was. And it made me reevaluate everything. And that moment changed my life entirely and became a pivot point where I decided that I needed to learn who I was, what I wanted, and how I wanted to show up in this world, how I wanted to leave my life as a legacy that I was proud of, because I didn't want to get to the end of my life and think, what did I do? What was that for? What was the point? Did I enjoy myself? Was I fulfilled? Did I have joy? So that's what we're talking about today, is what is authentic for you? What brings you joy? The biggest slap in the face for me is that I thought 3 years ago, I left Google. I thought, this is what I want to do. I'm going to go do the thing that nobody else will do. I'm going to leave my global sales leadership job at Google, where I was doing very, very well. I'm going to go start my own business. And then, for all intents and purposes, I had an identity crisis. There is no way I could have been prepared for it. But when I left, I started to tell people that I was a speaker and coach, and that I was, doing leadership work. And I couldn't make it one breath without saying, but I worked at Google for 12 years. And it wasn't about Google. It's about what Google stood for. Because immediately, as soon as I said Google, people knew that I was smart, that I was high achieving, that I did big things. Like, yeah, you might think like, some not so great things if you know people from Google, but like for the most part, you knew that about me. And I didn't have that security blanket. So now I felt so raw, so vulnerable, so exposed. And so that actually led me to do a lot of really, really deep discovery around what keeps us from being authentic. Because most of us think that if we learn the technical skills, if we learn how to check the boxes of whatever that plan is that we devise in our head, that we'll be fine. But how many of you have ever gotten like on the path of your plan and you go, this wasn't what I thought it was going to be. This is not what I expected. Most of the time it's because of identity that keeps us that holds us back and keeps us from our authenticity. No one ever talked about that when I was in corporate. I was a trainer. I attended lots and lots of trainings. No one ever talked about the real stuff that is holding us back from our greatest potential. So that's what we're talking about today, is the stuff that's under the surface that's actually holding you back from knowing yourself and being your greatest, highest version of who you are. So I'm super, super excited about this. Hopefully that explains a little bit more about why I'm so passionate about this. It is my journey. It is the one that every single person I'm working with is on. And I think it's the one that is really part of our human experience and evolution. So I'm excited for it. Let's jump back into the slides and talk about authenticity. So tell me, what does authenticity mean to you? Because I've used this word a whole bunch of times and some of you may be going, well, this is gross. It's such a cliched word and I hate it. And I don't even understand why we're talking about this. So who wants to come off mute? And please, as many of you want to, as you can, or as you're able to, let's talk about what authenticity means.
Ahmad.
I've been thinking about this myself. My answer is you should be the same person in and out of work. That means, in and out of work, you should not, you should be the same person in and out of work.
Okay. So consistency.
Persistent personality. Consistent
Yes.
or persistent personality, yes.
Okay. Love that. Love that. Thank you.
If you got something to say, say it.
Yeah. Cool. Oh, I love that. If you've got something to say, say it. Ooh, does anybody else struggle with that? Sometimes I really struggle with that. Okay. Who's next?
Neko.
So for me, authenticity is all about the masks. You know, we usually wear a mask when we are in different, and the masks may change depending on the environment we're in. So we wear a mask for work, we wear a different mask for networking maybe, and we wear a different mask in family. And being authentic is basically not wearing that mask and knowing who you are, being comfortable with who you are, and letting that lead you, because it usually works better.
Love that. It's from being a consistent mask or persistent personality everywhere to like taking it all off, knowing who we are so we can be that version everywhere. And I think Phil said being the transparent version of yourself to all. That's hard. Anybody else want to add anything?
I think it's you should be who you are. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I can't see the screen. I apologize. Oh, Amir. I see Amir. No?
No, it was Harvey. Harvey speaking right now.
I think Harvey was trying to say.
Okay.
But he's on mute. Harvey, you're on mute.
Harvey, you're on mute.
Is he able to unmute?
Apparently what he's saying is very funny.
So I wanted to thank Amir for raising his hand for me because I don't know how to do it yet. That's authenticity.
I'm okay if we don't use the hand raise function. There's a few of us. There aren't that many.
So anyway, authenticity is basic to me. It's just doing what you say.
Okay. Love that.
So I have something. It's Jill.
Hi,
Jill. So I think authentic is being who you are when I guess there's no one else to judge who you are.
Yes.
And So I know when I'm on a call, if my CEO's on the call, or when I first started, let's say here, I'm on a call and I act a certain way, or there's some other people on the call, I act a little guarded. When I'm meeting people and there's no one that I have to be like afraid of, I can tell my interaction is just totally different with the people I'm talking to, because I'm not thinking I'm being judged by someone else. And to be who they think I should be at the moment. I'm just being me at the moment without fear of being me.
I love that, because you answered both the first and also the second. When do you struggle? So it sounds like fear of judgment, fear of like the retribution that will come from, if I am me, then what happens? It becomes dangerous feeling. I love that. Does anybody else want to share? When do you struggle with being authentic? You can answer what is authentic, but also like, when do you struggle with it? Joe,
yeah, Erika.
Oh, yes.
You know, my father was a Marine, so I always grew up, you know, him always telling me be a good person and, you know, act the way you do as if like nobody's watching, right? Just be yourself. And so I've always grown up with that, you know, meaning that you're a good person if you act the way you are in a room by yourself. But yeah, I definitely struggle. I try and, you know, read the room and try and hold back. But is that being not authentic?
That is a good question that we will continue to answer as we go. Because again, like, I think it's also, to a certain extent, it's a personal observation as well. I mean, often it's very difficult for us to be very objective about ourselves. And we sometimes know when we're being authentic and when we're not, and when it feels safe to be authentic and when it doesn't. So I think it's a great question that we'll continue to address. Thank you, Alan. Joe, how about you? You'll give us the last word on this one and then we'll move forward.
Yeah, I was going to say, authenticity to me is being true to yourself and then portraying that to the world, regardless of any outside influence or environment.
Like that.
Love that. Love that. These are all amazing answers. Does anybody struggle to actually put into practice the things that we just heard? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like, it's one of those where it's like, okay, good. So I got the memo. I know how to do this, or I know like what to do. But then the question is like, how? So that's what we're going to be talking about. So to tell you what authenticity actually means, because a lot of us, some people, like, we get this advice all the time, right? Like, just be your true self. And especially when it comes to important things like first dates or job interviews or meetings with the CEO, like, oh yeah, that's a perfect time to test out being my true weird self. Or people use it as an excuse for bad behavior, right? Like, I'm just being my true self, when really what that is it's insecurity in sheep's clothing or in confident clothing. Because often when we are excusing bad behavior, that is very much an emotional reaction that we're trying to deflect on the other person and make them feel bad and calling it authentic. So what is authenticity? Dance like no one's watching. Oh my gosh, I can dance like no one's watching, but I can't act like no one's watching.
I've seen Anthony do that.
Okay, so let's talk about what authenticity actually means. I'm pulling up Brene Brown and I'm actually looking back at the origin of the term. So in Old Greek, the origin of the term authentic actually means acting on one's own authority. That's it. Self-made. So we get to decide that we are acting with intention, that it is in our power to decide how we are acting. So the more that we think, act, and live with intention, the more authentic we become. Many of us, I know for me, certainly, I looked everywhere for the answers for who I was. I mean, I talked to experts, I paid lots of money to talk to experts. I read books, I did all kinds of soul searching, trying to figure out who I was, thinking it was some grand destination. Like, once I found myself, that was it. But in reality, it's the moment by moment decision for us to act, think, and live with intention. That's it. So it is a practice that we commit to with every choice that we make. So this is pretty important, because the more that we act with intention, the more impact we have. I mean, again, most of us hear and believe that authenticity is important, but let's take a look at why. So this is called the trust triangle. If you've never heard of Frances Frey, she's a Harvard professor. She did this amazing TED Talk on her work, her trust work with Uber, when Uber was going through like their awful time a few years ago. And she introduces this trust triangle. And what she says is that trust is made up of 3 factors: empathy, logic, and authenticity. So if we don't have authenticity, we can't actually have trust. It is the most difficult of the 3 pillars to actually create or to have, because empathy is that, you know, we feel for other people. Logic is that they can see that we're thinking clearly. Authenticity is that we are consistent with who we are, and that they can trust that we are actually being ourselves. And research confirms that this is an effort that's well worthy of the pursuit. There is so much research out there that shows that authenticity leads to higher sales, better performing D&I efforts, stronger business results, happier employees, better retention. Basically, there's nothing bad that can come from authenticity if we are actually practicing it properly. And so if we want stronger business results and happier employees, we do need authenticity. But the trick is, I can't teach you authenticity, because authenticity isn't about what you do. It's really about what you undo. Authenticity isn't some tool in our tool belt. It's about allowing ourselves to free ourselves to become more of who we truly, truly are. We have to learn what is standing in the way of us knowing ourselves and being ourselves, because what is standing in the way is also the thing that prevents us from being able to make meaningful change in our lives, because change and authenticity are very deeply and intrinsically related to one another. And the thing is, what's standing in the way is us. So that's the good news and the bad news. But that's why I can't teach you authenticity, because you're the only thing that's standing in your way of authenticity. So let's talk about what that actually means. So who here has, like, I don't know, New Year's resolutions or goals that they're working on? Change. Anybody ever like have a goal that you've been working on for a while that you know you want to accomplish? You know the actual, like, kind of the process you should follow, like you've read books, you've listened to podcasts, whatever it is, but you just can't make it work. You can't do the thing that you know you want to do. Anybody? Am I alone in this? Okay, well, sounds like I'm getting some head nods. All right. So most of us have this. And the thing is, we think that we're rational. We think that we should be able to set our sights on something, decide what we want, and then it'll be smooth sailing from there. But, like, you know, again, whether that's a New Year's resolution of weight loss or better balance or going to bed on time or watching less TV or drinking more water or speaking up in meetings or being able to be ourselves in front of our CEO or dance like nobody's watching, all those things are great. But the problem is, when it comes down to it, most of us have a difficult time actually executing on that, and we don't really know why. And so then we think there's something wrong with us, and then it tends to create a spiral of guilt and negativity. So the reality is, we are not rational beings. Does anybody have any idea what percent of the time that we are sort of acting is conscious versus unconscious? Anybody have any idea how much of what we do is conscious? 10%, Phil says. Anybody else?
25.
25% is
Seven.
conscious.
Less than 7%.
Less than 7%. Anybody else?
15%.
5%. Is it Nico? Neko? How do I pronounce that?
Neko.
Neko is right. If we were doing like big money, you'd get it.
I was going to say, I like the Mir's Price is Right approach.
Yeah. Yes. It's 5%. That's crazy, right? 5% of everything we think and do is actually conscious. That means 95% of everything that we think and do is unconscious. And our unconscious is not motivated by our rational thoughts. The problem is when you go into, Neko's like, yes, I've read this book. So the thing is, when you go into a training, when you read a book, when you make a plan, you're using your rational brain. The challenge is it's only in charge about 5% of the time. So when you get into those situations, into other situations, your unconscious comes online and is actually the thing that's making the decisions much, much more frequently than we realize. But because it's unconscious, we don't recognize it because it's unconscious. So the unconscious is actually motivated by our emotions, our previous experiences, and our memories. So it's sort of playing very old scripts. And the primary goal of the unconscious is to keep us safe, to keep us alive. So it's going to do whatever it can to keep us surviving. So that's the reason why even when we know what we want to do, it becomes very difficult for us. And have you ever had that feeling of like, I know what to do, but I can't make myself do it? It's sort of that like foot on the gas, foot on the brake thing, but you can't figure it out. This is what it is. It's because your unconscious is preventing you from taking action. It's putting the foot on the brake, even as you consciously want to put a foot on the gas, because there's something that feels unsafe. Does that make sense, at least theoretically? We'll talk about this in more detail. 99% of our conscious thoughts are usually bull. Absolutely true. Did you know we have 50,000 thoughts a day and 95% of them are repetitive and 80% are negative? So pretty much most of what we actually do think is bad, not great. Okay, so let's talk about what our unconscious is actually protecting. Anybody know?
Survival.
Survival, yeah. So, but what is it? Like, what is the thing that we need for survival? That our unconscious like makes it feel like it's dangerous for us to put our hand up in a meeting or to
the fear of the unknown.
Fear. Yes, it's absolutely fear.
Fear of not being socially accepted as humans.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Look at this fight or flight. You guys, I mean, I love this. Everybody is just on it today. It's
lack of confidence.
Yeah, it's our identity. Our unconscious is protecting our identity. And so to what Phil said and what many of you said, our identity is a complicated term because our identity isn't actually us. Our identity is how we establish connections with others and the world around us. So from the time we are born, we have to depend on other people in order to survive. So if we do not have their acceptance, we literally will die. So from the time we're born, our unconscious is learning how to act, what we need to be, what we need to say, the way that we need to behave so that we get the approval and acceptance from the people on whom we depend. Does that make sense? Absolutely. So again, like this is all happening unconsciously because your brain's this part of your brain is developing much earlier, and it stops developing from about the time you're 7. So many of the things that you are still feeling afraid of unconsciously are actually things that are related to stuff that happened very early in your life, that we're just playing these old scripts, if that makes sense. So again, when we behave in ways that get us approval and acceptance, then those feel like they're necessary for our survival. And then those become part of our identity. You see how that works? So now our identity is necessary to be protected so that we feel safe. And as soon as our identity feels like it is at challenge, so this is what our identity is. I missed this. Sorry. Who we see ourselves to be, who we think we should be, and who we can't be. So as soon as our identity is challenged, as soon as we come face to face with who we can't be, then we feel unsafe. Our unconscious is going to go into overdrive to protect us. I know this is kind of complicated. Yeah.
So I'm really curious because we've all come across these people, you know, with no self-awareness and just seems like they could care less what you think of them or, you know, steamroll over people. And are they missing that cog?
No, often it is also as a result. I mean, some could be like they could actually be antisocial or something like that, where they maybe can't read social cues, like, but that's more the extreme. In most cases, it's actually a defense mechanism. And so, but it's very different from many of ours. So but it's still very much a protective mechanism. And actually that's something that we'll talk about in the next session is what these reactive patterns look like, because sometimes it's difficult for us to see the identity itself. It's easier for us to see when we get reactive, and then we can sort of track back to what was the trigger. But just to skip to what you're talking about, those are often people who they sort of, they're like the bomb throwers. They want to deflect, they want to deflect all the attention off of them and onto the other person in terms of like the discomfort. And so we'll talk more about that next time, but those are like, to use fight or flight, these would be the people who fight often. Okay, so again, the reason this is really, really important is that what our unconscious is reacting to is fear, the fear that if we are exposed for who we can't be, then we won't belong. So in the identity research, an unwanted identity or being seen as who we can't be is considered the quintessential elicitor of shame. Like as in, I fear that I will not belong, I will be ostracized, I will die if I am exposed as this unwanted identity. And it means that without any conscious control, we will begin to unconsciously try to prevent that thing from happening. Does that make sense? So that's why it's happening below our consciousness. And that's why it's important to recognize when these things that they happen so that you can be on the lookout for them. And again, next time we'll talk about like what to look for specifically, so that you can start to find evidence of these. We're going to do an activity to help you all actually see what's happening in your own life a little bit more. And you all have already asked some amazing questions. So as I mentioned, identity is actually formed very, very early, and the unconscious protective mechanisms usually are solidified by the time we're around 7 to 10 years old. So we have to actually look back at our early childhood in order to see what some of these identity triggers are that you're still carrying with you today. This isn't about healing your past. It's about seeing the baggage that you're still carrying around with you right now. So I will say two things. Many people feel very uncomfortable looking back at their childhood because they feel guilty looking at or speaking badly about their parents or whoever raised them. Please don't. This isn't about pointing fingers. This is about bringing awareness to things that are there, not about saying anybody did anything wrong. I'm sure everybody was doing the best they could, but it's important to be able to look at it so that you can see what's still there for you right now. The other is that there are a lot of people who have had, there's a lot of identity stuff that comes from early childhood, whether it's our parents or the other really important figures in our lives. So whatever comes up, just sit with it. If it starts to feel vulnerable, it means you're there. That's a good thing, even if it feels uncomfortable for you, because sometimes it can be hard for us to look at. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So if you do not have a pen and paper out right now would be a great time to grab one. And just so you know what we're going to be doing, we're going to do some self-reflection for a couple of minutes with some prompts. And then we're going to send you into a small group discussion for a few minutes, just to kind of like talk about what you noticed. And then we'll come back together and talk about that for a few minutes, and then discuss what we'll be talking about for next week. Sound good? Okay. So what you're going to think about right now is think back to your early childhood. And if it's hard for you to think about it, that's also an interesting observation for you. So just notice whatever comes up. Who did you need to be as a child to get attention and feel accepted from your parents or the important figures in your life? What did you learn was important to be or do, either because it was explicitly told to you or because you just understood? For me, I knew in order to get love, I needed to achieve. I needed to be really good at stuff. I needed to be a good girl, just to give you a couple of examples. But whatever comes up for you, just write it all down. Don't edit yourself. I'll give you about 10 more seconds. Okay, next question. Who could you not be? So what did you learn was unacceptable for you to be, do, or become? Who could you not be seen as? Again, this could be explicit, could be implicit. I couldn't be stupid. I couldn't be mediocre. I absolutely could not be selfish or narcissistic. Okay, take about 10 more seconds. Okay. So we're going to move into breakouts to discuss this a little bit more, but take a second before we do, just to write down some initial thoughts on what patterns do you notice in your life right now that are still related to some of those old things of what you could be and what you couldn't be. How has it played out in your life? How are you currently or recently doing big and small things to act to ensure you are seen in the ways that you need to be seen and not for who you can't be? I'll give you a simple example. Because I cannot be selfish or narcissistic, I can't say what I want without having to like talk myself into it. I must always ask people about themselves. I can't talk about myself. That's not okay for me. Like that's been something that comes up regularly. So think about like how the patterns are playing out in your life now. And then also what may be helpful is how do you react when you fear that you might be seen in a way you can't be? Like what happens to you? So take a few seconds just to jot this down. And then what we're going to do is everybody feel comfortable going into breakout groups to discuss this a little bit more, just kind of what's come up for you? Obviously, be as open as you feel comfortable with. Know that, again, many of us struggle. Many of us go, my childhood was really great, blah, blah, blah. Don't worry about that. Don't feel the need to, I mean, yes, if you want to, you can say that, but save time and go straight to, here's what I noticed. And we'll spend about, Jake, let's do 6 minutes for this, if that's okay for you, unless that screws it up, and then we'll just go with the original. Nope. Does everybody feel clear? So we're just going to discuss what came up for you. What did you notice? How are you, what patterns are you seeing in your life now? And we'll just spend about 6 minutes in these breakouts, and then we'll come back together. Sound good?
Erika, this is what V5O is so great. We push everyone out of their comfort zone. So whether you're comfortable or not, just be authentic.
Yeah. I still want you to feel safe being vulnerable.
I know.
Okay, so Jake's going to send you guys into breakouts, and we'll see you in about 6 minutes to discuss.
All right, there we go.
Thank you.
See y'all soon.
Pick any room, Jake?
6.
You know what?
And I did stick her on one, so she may pop back.
Yeah, have her pop back.
Let's see.
She's in room 1.
In room 1. So can I move her? Yeah. Funny, I put her with Alan. Go figure.
I can move her to main session if you want me to.
Yeah, I just did. It might take a second. I might ask her first before it lets her. There we go.
Excellent.
All right. And you're in room 6, Lane?
Yeah, I'm going to hang with you guys. Let them.
All right, that's fine.
I don't want to be an influence for and against anybody. I do this every day.
Okay.
Oh, you're muted, Erika.
You're muted. It came back muted.
Yeah.
The reaction when I went into a breakout, they were like,
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, not me. They were like, this feels weird. So
well, I was like, of course I put her in the same breakout room as Alan, so that probably made it seem even worse.
No, it's fine. Thank you for bringing me back and for navigating that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
It's great. I'm just looking, I'm trying to relax and take it all in, but I'm also looking at everybody's eyes and facial expression. And I just love what I'm seeing. And, Erika, every Monday and Friday, we do breakout sessions, and we have topics each week. Some are about business, some personal, some are complete shock value.
Yeah.
So I think that everybody is really eating this up because they're used to putting it out there and being vulnerable and having that safe space.
Awesome. I mean, that's so great. I'm glad that you all have already created that container for people to do it. So yeah, that means that we'll be able to dive in even more deeply in the next 2 weeks too, to discuss like the application of how that's impacting their lives more and the things that they can be doing to work around it. That's awesome.
We've gone through many boxes of tissues during breakout sessions.
Yep.
Okay.
Any things you need me to pivot for when we come back?
I think everybody's eating it up.
Awesome.
It goes fast. I can't believe it's 4:45 already. It's like, wow.
I know. Yeah, it's amazing. Well, the good news is, like I said, next time we'll be able to jump in much more quickly to the like more of the discussion, and then we'll probably be able to do a couple of interactive stuff or things as well. I am just going to edit this presentation because I wasn't sure where we would end up ending.
Thanks for jumping in on this, Jake. Guess we're gonna have to give
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
You're so good. You're like, when you're like, I just need like basically this most minor direction. You're like, I'm good. I got this.
Believe me, I think I did 480 sessions last year.
Wow.
Yeah, I work for the company called Interaction Associates, and
gosh.
they do more leadership training.
Yeah.
And like meeting training and stuff like that. And yeah, we've got to the point where we used to start a half hour early with the presenters. Now we're like 10 minutes. We're like, here's the list of stuff I need to know. Okay, we're
Yeah,
go.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's amazing. Yeah, it's like this to me. This is the most interesting thing to talk about, because I think it's what keeps so many people away from being able to step into real leadership. But I love talking about like other leadership things too.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to, I reloaded so that I could. How much time do we have left?
Minute and a half.
Minute and a half.
Perfect.
So it'll close and then I'll give them 15 seconds before they come back, because I do that so they don't get cut off in the middle of a sentence.
Awesome.
The children are so well behaved, Erika.
Well, they weren't before. There was a big note that said they were not allowed to come to the door, and they did not listen to that while we were doing the prep. So now I think I've scared them into it.
Jake, are you seeing that? Kayla in room 5 asked for help.
No, actually, I don't see that.
That's strange.
Is it just to you?
Maybe because I'm the host and all your co-hosts.
Maybe co-host doesn't. Yeah, maybe co-host doesn't see that.
But I don't know what she needs help with. She's in the room.
All right, 15 seconds. I'll be back. 10 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
So just so you guys know, we'll do a group discussion and then preview what we'll do next week and then wrap it so that we're on time.
You're back.
That was very authentic.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Okay, so is it?
Yeah, we felt it was a little bit too short. We want to speak.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to look
gonna
around
be
and make
too
sure
long.
that all the people in my group made it back.
Did everybody make it back?
Yes.
Nobody got kicked off the boat. Okay, excellent. So my request is let's make this a discussion so that you don't have to feel like the formality and slow down with the formality of raising your hand and all of that. It sounds like, how was it? Not enough time.
It was amazing. It was amazing. Can I ask one question on behalf of an anonymous? Because no one really knows who went into what breakout, right?
Yes.
But you did bring up that there is a possibility that someone can't even recollect.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Well,
am I getting too far ahead?
No. It's there are a lot of things that it can mean. In my own personal experience, it meant that there was trauma that was repressed. And that is often what it means. I did not know about my own trauma until like the last couple of months, when I finally started digging in very, very deeply to some very early things. Again, I'm not trying to scare anybody, because that doesn't necessarily mean it. It could mean all kinds of things. But I will say that a pattern that I noticed early, just in case this is helpful, because what I find is very helpful in this kind of work is to look for patterns in your life. And for me, the pattern that started showing up is that I idealize things. And I also couldn't remember early a lot of early childhood. So I could only remember good stuff. But then there would be enough like discrepancy that all of a sudden it was like, this isn't adding up. And so if you're noticing things like that, it may be worth digging in more. But again, I mean, certainly this is something to be done with a professional or in a very, very safe space. But it's something that, you know, to know. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that, though. Does that help?
Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So for those who remembered or had a good discussion, regardless, what came up? What did you learn? What did you notice?
I learned that
birth order matters.
Okay, say more.
Well, so we had a couple in ours that had, everybody but me had larger families. So they were either fighting for attention or doing something different to make sure they got attention, or they just had to deal with what they had. And so I think definitely family size and your birthing order makes a difference on your overall upbringing. And definitely, I think there's more dynamics with more head count as far as siblings.
Or they can be very different dynamics, at least. And was that as part of that discussion, were you able to see how the birth order or those dynamics have affected or are still impacting the way people show up today, the decisions that they're making?
I'd say so. And I'd say that my group would agree with that. So,
okay.
I don't want to point anybody out, but yeah, there were a couple people I was like, okay, that makes sense. It works, but it's positive.
Yeah. Okay. What
I've
else?
learned, you know, it's funny, Erika, because throughout my marriage and having children, you know, each time they spent a little bit more time with my father, they would come back to me and say, it all makes sense now. And he, you know, one of the best, you know, growing up, I'm so blessed to have just incredible parents, but my God, I see him come out in every which way but Tuesday, you know, with me. And, you know, the lying, the cheating, the steal, God forbid anyone ever got caught in my house doing that, because we would watch my father cut off someone after 40 years without blinking an eye if they lied, if they got caught stealing. And it would make us crazy, like, hey, where's that guy? And he's like, you know, move on. Don't even talk about him. He lied, he stole, he cheated. So to this day, I take it so personally, and it becomes an issue that sometimes I can't see beyond that, right, for the second chance. So it does.
Can I ask a question about that, if you feel comfortable with me asking?
Absolutely.
And you can obviously like not answer, but
have you met me?
Yeah, well, I just always want everybody to know that they have the ability to say like, no, thank you. I imagine as you think about your own identity, I make this up, so you tell me what feels more true for you, that there might be like a fear, but you cannot be seen as a liar, as a, you know, for any of these things that were not quote unquote good. And that could narrow your range of even what you allow yourself to explore or be to a certain extent because of those fears. Is
Absolutely.
That true? Yeah.
And when I'm explaining something or a story that sounds crazy, I overemphasize, you know, how real and it really did happen. And there's no need for it because they're not questioning my integrity, but I feel this inner to overemphasize that this is true. This is, you know, so it's like, I almost get like a feeling of paranoia.
I can imagine that. I make up like only because I've seen it in other places. Like, it's like hypervigilance and walking on eggshells too, and those things. Like I have to be perfect here. Like I can't ever be mistaken for saying something untrue, because then I'll be iced out. It sounds like your survival theoretically would have been at risk with your father. If not really, it would have certainly been a question from a.
Or being in a fraternity house back in college, right? And something's missing. I am.
Yeah. Ooh, I can
on the
feel,
top of my lungs.
Felt your stomach go like that.
I would have, wasn't me.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, well, maybe it was, because you're like crazy about this.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing and going there. So can you see how, even if we take even that surface, it's like, oh yeah, this is how it shows up in these deeper ways.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to share?
So when you talk about being authentic, and, you know, I've had this, so there's negative, you know, trauma in my life. You know, I'm not ashamed to admit it. My father was a bastard. So he made my life miserable. So but people, you know, in my life would say, well, put it away, move on from it. I'll never move on from it, because that's part of who I am. So you talk about being authentic. It's how I deal with it, how I, you know, don't let it. And I swore to myself that when I had children, I would never, ever be close to the father that my father was to me. So it has been a continued struggle to be a better father and make my children's lives better than I had as a kid. So, you know, you talk about being authentic. To me, it's part of who I am. And when you talked about, like, you know, thinking, I react, you know, and that rage or that anger comes out. That's not who you know, deep down, I'm a sweet, kind, you know, person, but that rage is my father's upbringing. That's what comes out. You know, I got yelled at. I've told people I was the shyest, painfully quiet person. You can't tell it from now, but I wouldn't speak because I was afraid to speak. Because if I said something, I was saying something wrong, and I get yelled at and screamed at. So up until my 20s, I didn't speak.
Now we can't shut them up.
You can't shut me up now. I just gotta remember not to be Richard, you know.
Thank you for sharing.
To add to that, Robert, I feel very similar. I had a really bastard of a dad also, and I had a sweet, loving mom. And so as an adult, I have those urges, I guess, as the dad. And I made a decision years and years and years ago as an adult that I would suppress the bad and just try to have the good. But you're right. I think about that a lot, that be mom, not dad.
And Jill, I love what you're saying. And what I would say, just to kind of bring what you all are saying together, it's many of us think that the way to sort of survive is to just cut off that part, compartmentalize. But the reality is, because our unconscious is so strong, there isn't any way to compartmentalize, because our emotional reactivity is going to come from that unconscious place. And we can't control that unless we become really aware of it. So that means automatically you must be aware of it, which means you can't compartmentalize it. So the healthier way is to be willing to look at all of it, which is one of the reasons that we did the childhood question to start with, so that we can begin to integrate those things, because the goal here is to be our full selves and to experience our full range. And the more that we think that we must have a narrow range in order to be safe, the more that we're cutting ourselves off from our full potential and from the gifts that we have for ourselves as well as for the world. So it isn't about, go rage, but it's about learning that is part of who we all are, and, you know, getting to the bottom of it if you want to, or finding ways to express that rage in healthy ways. Like, there are rage rooms that my coach literally recommends me go to regularly. So it's not about not having the emotions. It's about having the ability to know that they're all okay, but finding the appropriate outlet for them. So,
and if I may add something, it's you said exactly what I think. It's like we can't control having emotions, and we don't want to control having emotions. We can control how we react to our emotions, and there's no moving on in life. Is that there's moving forward. And you move with the baggage you have, and I'm a strong believer that everything that happens to you in life is a gift in disguise. Even if it's a very bad thing, if you learn to use that energy from the rage for something else, and you can.
Absolutely. I love that. That is such an empowered perspective. And I know we're almost at time, so I love, you just teed it up perfectly, because in our next session, we're going to take what we talked about today, and we're actually going to talk about how your reactivity is showing up in your lives. So I'm going to give you specific signals to look for, and then we'll do some activities around it as well, so that you can start to see what to look for in your own life, as well as what other people might be doing. Because a lot of times, we think that somebody else is being confident and authentic, but really, again, it's just they're being reactive and coming from fear as well. So we'll do a lot more deep dive into that. And then we'll also be giving you, and again, in the third session, a magic wand. So ways that you can start to feel more integrated and more intentional versus reactive, because we, as Neko said, we can't control that we have emotion. We get to choose what we do with it. So it's about that power shift. So what I would encourage, I like to give homework sometimes to my coaching clients. And since we're going to be together for the next 2 weeks as well, I would really encourage you to be aware of your patterns. Start to look for, how are these things that you noticed from the identity activity that we did? How are they coming up? How are they informing the way you are making decisions, big and small? Like, it could be literally you're standing in a grocery line and there's somebody behind you that has 2 things, and you think, oh yeah, like as a child, I couldn't be, this is a real example. I couldn't be selfish, and I had to be super hyper vigilant about everybody around me. So now I am always paying attention to who's behind me, because I needed to be kind and hypervigilant. So I let people go ahead of me in the grocery line. Again, it's probably something I would do anyway, but there's probably some identity stuff there too. So pay attention to, how is your identity showing up? How are you reacting in ways to ensure you're not seen in ways you can't be, and ensuring you are seen in ways that you need to be, in order, that comes from early childhood. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Any questions, any comments, any thoughts you want to share before we are done?
This is very, very awesome, Erika. Very, very nice.
Awesome. Amazing.
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
I hope to see you all next week. There's more to do.
Erika,
undo.
1 second. If you don't mind just telling people, companies that you're working with, companies that you're looking to work, you got some very connected people on there. So I got to pull the V5O thing and see how.
Yeah, sure. Well, I hope that I get to say this again in the future, because I hope I'm going to see all of you. But I mean, I do this work that I find that talking about authenticity is the foundation for having more successful teams and results in our companies. So this is often the starting point of a lot of the leadership work that I'm doing with teams. For instance, I'm working with a couple of high-tech companies right now to help them improve their sales teams and learn how to expand their relationships, take bigger risks, have more impact. That's the kind of stuff that I love doing, is really helping people identify their strengths, come from a place of authenticity, so they can feel more fulfilled in their work, not leave. That's the other thing. So many people are leaving their jobs because they think a better job is somewhere else. What I know deeply from having literally jumped off the corporate cliff is, it's not about where we stand, it's about how we stand. So there are always opportunities for us to learn how to be more authentic and fulfilled in the work that we're doing, and have more impact. So that's the kind of work that I do, helping sales teams, leaders, groups, feel better about the work they're doing and have more impact.
Erika, do you have like some bullet points, or like if we wanted to share that with somebody, maybe you could post it, because trying to explain in layman terms what you do will certainly not do it.
Leadership development is basically what I do, is like the easiest way of saying it. It's just very good leadership development. But yes, hopefully, will you all be joining us next week, because this is the first of a 3-part series. So I'll be able to go into a lot more detail about some of those bullets in the future sessions, but absolutely, I'd be happy to. And my website, if you want to check me out on my website, it's my name, it's erikagerdes.com.
And for all those that don't go on LinkedIn and see my posts, go check. There's probably 4 or 5 posts about Erika this week. All the information's there. Reach out to Lane and myself. We can get you connected directly to Erika.
Yeah, and I will say that I love talking to people and I love helping people. It's why I do what I do. So, and I truly, truly mean that. So, if you want to chat about questions that you have or things that you're thinking about, would absolutely love to schedule some time. I'm happy to share out a calendar link so that you can find some time on my calendar just to chat more, see if there are ways that I can support you, your team, your organization, and we can go from there. Amazing. Awesome. Thanks you all so much. I really hope I get to see you all next week.
Oh, we'll make sure of that. We'll make sure of that.
Definitely.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Erika.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Erika, this is
you.
talking to your subconscious, that 95%. You did great. You looked great. You spoke very well. And I tell you, this is one of the most receptive
Look at this, my face is
an
red.
audience. So if you were to ask yourself after this from somebody or yourself, how did I do? Well, the answer is you did great.
Well, I appreciate that so much. Thank you very much. The biggest thing is I always hope I add value. And so thank you. As I said, you could clearly, I have no poker face because my face turns red. So
Amir, people like us
do things like us.
Thank you so
I
much.
did that, Erika, just so that if I send you a LinkedIn request, I would not be Adam from across the bridge. At least there was a voice and a face.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. Look at this. I can't stop smiling. You made my day. Thank you all. I hope you all connect with me. If I'm not connected with you, I'd love to be connected. All right. Talk to you soon.
Take care, Erika. Thank you so much.